Welcome to the Soul Revolution Tribe podcast, where we share stories, laughs, and even a few tears, but always a good time. We are about depth and real raw sharing through soul conversations and medicine. We are learning to find ourselves again and to be an unstoppable force of nature, ready to break down the constructs and rebuild them with love and acceptance at its core. We are the new world. Welcome, Colleen. I'm so honored to have you on this podcast. Like, we just instantly click, and we have so many different like aspects of the world that most people don't look at. And I just love that, like the deep conversations we can have. So I'm excited to share that with the listeners today. First, I wanted to start out with sharing like your story of how you got, like how you view parenting and where you're at now. Because I know that we've had conversations of like a couple years ago, you would have looked at where you're at now and no one would have expected your life to look like it does now.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this stuff. I feel like this is a giant leap for mankind. It's taking power back with our parenting. But mine started where a lot of people started with the whole pandemic, and bringing the teacher into our home, I think opened a lot of our eyes to like what was being taught and like kind of the curriculum, like what they were doing like with our kids, and like I guess like personal belief systems that were fitting into like that were kind of sneaking into their school day, especially coming from someone who like completely was seen differently than the masses, and then hearing like really like the reason we have children is to mold them into like these people who we you know who like we like want to honor, like raise them up and stuff, and like turn them into like great human beings with like be able to think for themselves. And I was realizing that like my kids were only in like kindergarten, first grade, and I was like, oh my god, they're they're already like kind of pushing their beliefs on them in when they should be teaching them math and
Yeah,
reading
and
and
there's
like
so much
all.
pressure nowadays.
Yes.
This is different. Back in the day where kindergarten was just like color a pretty picture and we're playing with other kids. Now it's like now you're learning the basics of reading and things like that. Not that that's bad, but it's just so much like doing instead of letting the flow of
Right.
like learning process to come through.
Yeah, well, it was like really interesting, and I know it was different in the classroom, but like you said before this, I was like the classroom mom. I would like do the parties and stuff like that, but I kind of just honored the teachers, and like, I mean, I didn't even use that verbiage back then. I just trusted the teachers, like thought like, I went through school, it's just what you do, like you send your kids to school. And it was like one of those first times that you realize like there are more than one, like even two options, because it's like at that point I thought it was public school or private school, and I put them in public school and stuff. And I, coming from someone who went all the way through Catholic school, I
Yep.
knew I was never going to do, like, I'd already like woken up to the religion thing that was like well before this, so I was like, that the public school is the next step. And wow, it was I could say my final straw was when it was in a time where my husband is in a career where he is like was fighting for like his job to not have to get what
Yep.
and stuff. And so he was like, we would talk about it like it was a big deal in our home. And then I heard the teacher, when I was sitting there because he would do the class in front of me, like in our living room, and she started telling him how important it was for everyone to get it. And like how like she was not going to be there the next day because she had to go and get it and all these things. And I was like, what the actual F is happening? Like,
Yeah.
he is in first grade,
They're
and
so
why?
little that shouldn't be
Yeah.
their concerns.
It's oh no, and like I like literally pulled them out, didn't let them go back to in-person school because I didn't want them to be in school with masks, because I'm like, it was that scared tactic that like everyone,
Yeah.
like, it was so much fear going through these little.
So much
And then like,
anxiety for these little
oh
bodies to hold when they're already trying to
yeah,
regulate so many big emotions.
oh my gosh. And so it was one of those things when I saw her like instilling that fear that I had protected them from, like, because it's not, yeah, exactly. They're not at the mental, like, they don't have the mental capacity to like understand what's happening. I was like, nope, that is it. So the next day I let the school know that I was going to be doing this program on my own. And from there, that was, I don't know what is time. I feel like that was only last year, but it feels like it was like 5 years ago. but anyways, so then that's when I shifted to doing it all on my own, and it's been a learning experience. There's been a lot of moments. There's been like, but it was like, it's also has felt so right and stuff, and it's been like such an honor to like get to. I never thought I was going to be the mom to homeschool. I told you that, like, it was like kind of like a joke because I just wasn't. I'm not like that type of mom. I'm great with the littles, and then like it's just, I don't
It's
want to go into.
not that's not innate where like you never were
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna be a teacher. I really like this is my
yeah.
calling. It just kind of flowed in.
Well, and like we talked about how you're a nurse, so it's like
Yep.
you have that like I'm
That
not a nurse.
I have that mother archetype automatically. So I
Yeah.
have that really like nurturing, like everything is like that in my life. Like I'm very nurturing, patient. Those
Well, and that's what,
aspects.
like, for me, it's more like, I like talk to them. I start talking to them like when my oldest turned 4, I is when I had the twins. So I went from 2 kids to 4 kids, all within 4 years of each other. And that's when like the shift really happened, where it's like I started to realize I treat my 4-year-old like I like that nurturing. I'm like, come on, like, use your brain, like, logically, let's think about this. And people will be like, he doesn't really have logic yet. I'm like, yeah, because no one's teaching it to him. The 4-year-olds can have logic,
Oh yeah.
but it's not like that like, oh, it's just funny, like
Yeah.
how I am like with children. I just interact with them way differently than like the nurse or the teacher. So people just did
Yeah.
not expect me to like have this. And so like for me though, but that's the beauty of it. It's like my program probably
Yeah.
looks way different than your
And
program.
that's what I love about homeschooling is
Yeah.
it's if it's your family, whatever works for you. And you have multiple kids and I am homeschooling my two youngest. Like they're both different. Like we can do similar things, but I have to tailor it differently because they both learn differently.
Mm,
And I don't know about you, but like it was a roller coaster starting out because I started with the COVID too. It went from my youngest wasn't in school yet. My oldest did pre-K, didn't even get to finish pre-K it because COVID hit and everything happened and
mm,
everything got shut down. We did virtual school for more consistency pieces, and a lot of every school was virtual to start with. And then we
mm,
didn't want them to go in for a week and then be set out like all that
mhm,
transitions hard as it is. We were trying to create that consistent learning environment. But then he would cry every time the tablet came out. Like and this is a kid that loves technology, loves to play little like app games and things, but he would bawl because one he had he developed this anxiety of the Zoom meetings because you have all the little pictures and he thought everyone was staring at him because you see the faces, all the eyes on him, and he didn't like being that focal, even though it wasn't, but that's how his world felt. And then the modules they're not fun, interactive
mm,
kindergarten things. It was like, let me read to you for 10 minutes and then let's answer these questions that are not like simple. They're like, here's a sentence and now here's 4 sentence answers. It was not to his learning style. He's more hands-on and whatever. So I was able to work with the teacher and started like doing my own homeschooling lessons, which I didn't realize that that's kind of what I was doing at that point. And so we did that piece and then she would assess and we made it work because it was kind of like the whole world's in chaos and we've got to do what we got to do. And she's the one who's like, you could homeschool easily. You teach more than what a normal teacher would do and you don't have the teaching education. And then I liked that I could put my own thing. Like I can teach mindfulness, I can teach critical thinking and give
mm.
them those skills and those discernment skills and work those muscles that I think a lot of our society has kind of lost the ability of, or they're weak that they don't use their own like you're saying that logical aspect and that creative aspect. I can pull both of those. And really going into how that looked is then when I went to homeschool, I was trying to do public school at home, like the 8 classes a day and whatever
Right.
structure, because I didn't know better. Like that, okay, we can do this, and it was so overwhelming, and trying to
So
do all these things, and then we realized like throw the rule book out the window.
mm,
Like what is going to work for our family that we're covering all the bases still, but in a flow that feels natural and supportive to us. And that's where we got where we're at now. And like there's days where we're like mom doesn't feel great like as I just went over this like sickness and mom doesn't feel great, so sitting at the table really focusing on where mom has to read and we're doing all that paper time because we have table time too, it was just too, like, no one wanted to sit and focus and have the energy. We needed to kind of move our bodies and be more connected. So we did a lot of more play, play learning. Like we were learning through the play piece where a lot of people may not realize, and because if you ask my kids, because they go into like they have classes, so they were at parkour and they're going around when they're stretching asking questions and they're like, what did you do today? Like, what was one thing that not what you learned. It's like, what is one good thing you did today, or what one thing you did in school? To them, the play isn't school, even though
Yeah.
it is. So they're like, oh, we didn't do school because mom wasn't feeling well. It wasn't even that. And I laugh because I'm like, you have to look at the context. Like they think sometimes paperwork is what everyone else considers school, and their little brains are already like figuring that out of like I could say that we played grocery store and we made our grocery list and we added it up and things like all these skills that are real life skills that you're going to use, but you are pulling math and language and reading in, but you're making it fun where the kids don't even realize that we're doing work
Mhm.
at all. But to them, that was just playtime with mom.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
Well,
that though.
and like it also kind of teaches them like time management on your own, because when you put them like in the school, it's like you very much is that start of like you start at 8 a.m. and like you're done at 3, like, and
Hmm.
that's just your school day. Where like with my oldest son, we should also mention too, you have 3 boys, I have 4 boys.
Yes.
So homeschool too allows them to like be able to like literally go outside
Yeah.
when they're getting like like as boys do get
Move that
really,
energy.
yeah. And so it's like you're like go outside and like do something before like you can focus again.
Hmm.
But I'm already noticing with like my third grader, he he like figures out like he knows all the plans, like because I'm like following like different like, so he
Hmm.
will intentionally finish a whole month of math within like 2 days to just then be like, well, I'm done with math. Like I did like all 4 of the, and I'm like, no, that's not like, but at the same time, like, I mean, that's also like using his logical
Yeah,
brain. He
this is
realizes
what
like,
I want. This is what I'm
yeah,
creating
if
space
he
for.
gets, but then he realized if he finishes it that early, then I just give him more. So now he's like trying to like space it out. I'm like, that's another thing. Like he's like figuring this out on his own. And he's like, but then he's
Problem
also,
solving.
yeah, and he's like passing like those traits down to like, and now that his little brother, so he's in third grade, and then the next one is kindergarten, and our third grader, he loves like doing like helping administrating
Mhm.
the work to the kindergartner, and that's also beautiful to watch because
Yes.
it's like such a cute thing to watch, like my oldest like teach my second one like the alphabet and how to sound out words and how to spell, and it's like it's just this, it's such a different feel, and it like creates such a different like, we separate all these siblings, you know, who are
Yep.
like just that are so close. It's like literally it's a cluster of 4 boys, you know, that like, and I believe, I'm of the belief that obviously like we all choose who we want to like
Mhm.
live our lives with. So I'm like, they chose to live in the, like have this cluster. And like now I actually get to honor that, and they get to have like this time like this together, like where like we break them up, you know, like I remember like my sister and I were so close and so close in age, but then when we go to school we'd have to be separate all
You
day, you
navigate the
know.
world all by yourself in these new situations where you're
Yes.
like, I don't really know. So
Yeah.
you have that built-in support system. My sister and
Hmm.
I are only 18 months apart too, but we're in two separate grades. And it was the same thing. Is like we were very close and connected at home, but then it's like the school came. And then there was almost like bickering a little bit between
Oh
us
yeah.
because it's like, these are my friends, not your friends. Like I'm trying to create my own identity, but it was a whole shift of a world.
Oh, that's so fascinating. That's like literally what happened, especially when you get to like middle school, high school
Yes, and that's
ages.
where it kind of hit. In elementary,
Like,
it wasn't so big of a deal, but as
yeah.
soon as middle school hit, then it was more conflict. But it was also, I was one of those people like my sister can annoy the heck out of me because I have a little sister,
Uh,
and I can pick on her in my own way at home. But if you dare say anything negative or whatever, like that's not your place. Like I was a very protective big sister at the same point.
that's so funny. That's like another one of our like opposite, similar but opposite, because I'm the younger of the two sisters. So it's like as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, that was kind of like my older sister, where it's like yeah, like she was like, no, I can do this, you can't. But I like, you know, but But no, it is. It's like just to like really like honor like those sibling relationships too, and like kind of let those like unfold. And then like you talked about, you said parkour.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's like, and then that's like with them, it's interesting because I actually had our oldest one, we had him in like, piano, like all the different sports, all the different, and this like just this year was when I was like, I'm actually gonna like pull back on the amount of activities because I thought it was
Yeah.
like I needed to have like PE,
Yes.
I
The
needed to
pressure
have
of
like
all these
some
things you have to
music,
do.
yeah, from the yeah from, and it was really funny because, and then you go into that whole thing where kind of like this is another programming from school where it's like you see what like your child is good at, and so you're like, well, you have to continue doing that, and then you aren't even actually honoring what they want to do, you're just
Yeah.
assuming that like they have to do it. So it's also, there's a big lesson to be learned, and like when now that I spent so much time with them, I'm like, I'm not going to, I can tell what's making him happy, and I
Yep.
can tell what's like he's feeling forced to do, and I'm like, I'm not going to force him to do anything just because through my perception he's good at it, because it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't like. And then you think back to your trauma that you went through, like I always, like one of the things I tell is like I'm 5'10", I was good at volleyball only because I was always the tallest one there and stuff, and they needed me to be the center. So it's like I was forced into this sport that I hated, and I was
Yeah.
like
And
not
even if
even
you have
like,
the natural skill, like that's
yeah,
my oldest. He is an amazing trumpet player, and if he's
yeah,
passionate about something, he'll go out of his way. So when COVID hit, his teachers loved it because they're trying to figure out how to navigate music lessons virtually. And he's sitting here pulling up YouTube, learning how to play like Bruno Mars and things like
yeah.
that on his trumpet. But then as he grew up, he kind of grew up that stage where he was good at it, but the passion wasn't there anymore,
Mhm.
and so he wanted to step away, and that's where I got to look back and see the lens because his teacher didn't want to leave him, and it wasn't like him to leave because she saw the potential, and she's like, I don't want him to give up, but at the same point I have to show her the other shoe of like, I'm not forcing him to do something because he's good at it.
Yeah.
He has free will, and he gets to follow just like us. Like what we try to do, we tell our kids to follow their dreams, but yet would that be really following his dream if I'm forcing him down a path and trying to get him to go somewhere where he isn't being called?
Well, then, like going back to, yes, that, and then like going back to what I was saying about volleyball, it's like because of that pressure that I felt to like, like make varsity and like play club and like do all this stuff, like I started to hate it. Like, and so I was like,
Mhm.
whatever years, my senior year, I was like, I don't want to do this all senior year. Now it's so funny because my husband and I have started like doing it like a one more like recreationally for fun. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I love volleyball. I was like, I just hated with the like society, like what, like
Yeah,
I think
the
this is
pressure
so
of
fun to
the
do.
rules
Yeah.
and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we take these things that like you're innately good at, and then we put the pressure on them, and then you start to resent them. And I'm like seeing
Mhm.
that through my kids now. And then it's like we just like, he's really good, or he's through my, I'm his mother, so I think he's really good at everything, but like he's pretty good at piano. Right now he doesn't enjoy it, so it's like I don't want him to lose
Yeah.
that spark for like being good, so it turns into, and so it's like that was like a big moment for me where it's like we just assume because they're good at it, then we want to put pressure on them to do better,
Yes.
when it's like we're not actually just honoring. It's like there's things that I'm good
Their
at, and it's like
process.
yeah, and it's like I'm only going to get better if I feel called to get better. Like there's things that
We
I've
can't
like,
want their dreams be more than them. Like we
yeah,
can't want something for them. They've got to want it and put the work in too. And if it doesn't feel right, then allowing them to know, like that's how we have this rule is like we try different things, like if you're interested we can try it, go for it, but
yeah,
you will complete this session, like
yes,
whatever the thing is, because we follow through, we make commitments and we follow through for
mhm,
our point. That doesn't mean you have to sign up for it again, but if you
mhm,
committed to a team, you're going to commit to this amount of time, and we talk about that. If we want to enroll in this program, it's this long, that means you're committed to 8 sessions with this. Is this something you want? So they can kind of see the picture, and it kind of teaches them time, even though time's kind of like a very lucid concept at their young, like my boys are um they're 5 and 7 right now. So like that they don't really necessarily see the abstract pieces as much, but that doesn't mean that they can't. So I try to give them those views of seeing, okay, so this is what we're agreeing upon. If that feels comfortable, then all for it. If not, and you need more time to think about it, that's fine. But we got to decide. And then
mhm.
after that, when we're done, we don't have to like everything we do. But
Yeah,
we gotta put the effort and give it a try, and we're finding out what we like and what we don't like.
yeah,
And that's what
especially
life is about.
and especially like for us, like we have that same exact rule because if you join, especially a team sport,
Mhm.
or if like you like want if because we still like we talk to especially the oldest one, like we are honoring if he decides that he wants to go back to school next year. We're like,
Yep.
considering it, like we'll have the end say, but it's like we really want to. I feel like now he's gonna be like he's 9, so he's at the age where I feel like we've anyways, like I follow the astrology 7 years. Like I
Yep.
think you have the 7 year increments. So he's in his second phase where it's like, yes, he's still very, but he has a lot of his core values,
Yep.
like and he knows to come to like mom and dad stuff. But
It's just like our oldest. Our oldest, same, like, we give them the option. I even ask the little ones if they want to, per
yeah.
se. I give them, like, this is what's kinda going on, but this is my opinion. I always wanna instill that in them, like, this is my view. There's other
Uh,
views. This is my view. This is how other people can see it, but how do you truly feel? And I try to teach them to tune into their body and see what they feel right away from that young age, because no one taught me that when I was young. I had
oh
to
yeah,
teach myself later in life.
yeah.
I just look back of how different my life would have been if somebody taught me how to trust myself and my own intuition versus we're constantly told not to trust ourselves and just do what you're told.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what the all the practices I've learned are like literally you said like the whole mindful thing. And it's like even just teaching them like they love I took a course with someone who taught us all about toning and
Mhm.
stuff. So I was doing it one day and this was, like last year. They get so excited when we all sit in a circle and tone, like and like we
Yeah,
get like the energies out. And then they get so excited when like we close our eyes and we track where our energy body is and like what it's feeling and stuff. So they're like, it's just the funny things that kids, if you open them up to those experiences, they're way more intuitive than us
oh yeah.
because they don't have all their like cellular trauma going through them. So it's so funny. Like even just that's the stuff that it's like I'm it's the same thing with like piano. I'm not gonna force them to do
Mhm.
that. But when like they want to do it and they come to me, I'm like, oh yes, like, but
Absolutely, on
it's
their
it's
terms.
not yes.
That's how it
Like
is.
they're yeah, so it's all those things that are like these tools that like you teach them where I'm like, yeah, if I had these tools growing up, I would have been a way more like especially coming into like teenage years,
Oh
I
yeah.
would have been way
And be
would
able
have
to
been a way
allow
easier
yourself to
daughter.
truly understand and give yourself grace in those moments of like, yes, this is big emotions. Just like we deal with big emotions, they call them teenagers for a reason. Is like
Uh,
they're going through these big emotions, but the same thing in teenage years. It's just a little different packaging, but you're going through all these big changes and things, trying to figure it out. But to know that it's okay not to be okay, and it's
mhm,
okay to have all these different feelings coming through at once, and to be able to sit and like understand where they're coming from and what's under them, because you may feel angry but really it's not the anger, it's like the sadness under the anger, but the anger is covering that
mhm,
sadness so you don't have to feel it. Those pieces of just honoring, there's nothing wrong, there's no wrong or bad emotion,
yeah.
and just
Well, like if that's what's happening, like as like I have nieces and nephews in their teenage years and stuff, and like it's that's an age that like I really really enjoy. Like when people talk about like what age do you think that like you're like meant to be a parent? I'm like I really think like those teenage years. Like that's I
yeah,
connect with like my nieces and nephews, but watching them go through like their like they all have like these weird apps now where it's like they track their friends' locations and like all these different
yeah,
things, and then you have these conversations with them, and it's the whole thing where it's like every conversation ends up like being me telling them like like asking them how does that make you feel, and I'm sure no one even just says like how does
yeah.
that make you feel, and it's like just to understand like yeah that would make me feel pretty crappy too if I saw had an app where all my friends were at a party and I wasn't. This was literally an app that they had that I was just with one of my nieces, and there's a new app where you track, and so they will like like check in, and it's like they don't even have the tools to even deal with the emotional trauma that like our teenagers are going through
Yeah,
now.
it's
So it's
a
like if I
whole
could
new
that
world compared to when we
yeah.
were younger.
So it's like if
Like,
I
we
could give
did
that
silly
to my
things and
kids.
crazy things and made mistakes, but it wasn't like broadcasted to the world because we didn't have social media to be like we did this dumb thing and now it's recorded. Nope, it's just recorded in our memory. But now
Well,
they do everything. Every little thing is
not even that.
captured.
It's like when I saw that app, and apparently, like a lot of their apps, they can do that with. And I was like, that's so interesting because it's like in high school when you're going through that, like you knew you had suspicions. Some of your friends were like, like hanging out or
Yep.
like there's a party going on, but it's like you then like found out about it on Monday and you were like over it. Like
Yep.
now these kids are having to deal with
In
it
the
like
moment.
real time and be like, well, what? And so then like that moment of like, it's just like FOMO times a million and stuff, and it's just crazy. Like it's so that's one of like my big like motivating factors is like right now, like they're great, they're young, they still love like just being with mom and dad, but it's what I'm like really focusing on, and what like a huge thing I hope homeschooling does is like gives them like a sense of security and a sense of like when they do start to like enter these social situations, like they are in control of their emotions and it doesn't bring them to a vibrational state that they can't pull themselves out
Yeah.
of, because that's what you're seeing with a lot of these young kids
They're
where it's
grounded
like
in
they
who they
know,
are at that
yeah,
point, like the in that where they're at, they're grounded in that state where the aftermath of what the world does doesn't shake them. So like I
mm-hmm.
almost took my life at 15
Oh
and
my
no
god,
one would have known that. No one knew
yeah,
it until I said it older in my older years because they looked at me and they're like, You look like you had everything together. You like little Miss Sunshine. You're a little bubbly, whatever."
yeah,
But they didn't realize like there's so much pressure of keeping this persona of what everyone else expects of you
mm,
and being afraid to show who you truly are and those like different sides of you because it's not acceptable and you won't be belong or whatever. So you just keep going on this facade until literally that I remember that point in my life sitting there like right before like wanting to actually like take my life and going it would be less painful for everyone around me if I was no longer here than be a continuous disappointment. Not that
mm,
anyone's ever said that, but that's how I felt. I kept
yeah,
feeling like the stakes were getting so high that I didn't know how long I could keep this up. That I
it
could
goes
be
like
this
that.
golden girl and what everyone expected of me and let alone let myself feel because that just throws a wrench in all of it. And I remember my little sister, like, this is once again, it goes down to that we pick who we want in our circle. She's the one who saved my life that day. If she wouldn't have
Mm,
knocked on the door and because I was in the bathroom and she said, Jackie, I know you're busy, but I was just wondering, do you want to come play with me? Or whatever. And like, and then she made that like, but that like snapped me out going, I have
mm,
so much more to live and do. And there's people that really count on me.
mm-hmm.
Like it's time to shift things. It's time to start. And I didn't really know what that looked like at that point, but I
Yeah,
felt
yeah,
this change inside of me at that point. And it still had years of regulating and trying to figure out
yeah.
what that looked like, but it was that turning point. But I can relate to the pressure that these kids
Mm-hmm.
are under and that was back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like now it feel like it just grows.
Well, that's like the pressure of feeling like you had to be that person, and it's like the pressure that like, yeah, and it also kind of goes back to being like a young girl and like the pressure of like today's society. It's like with I'm gonna bring in like even the apps with like all the different like filters and
Mhm.
everything, and like the different ways that like girls like and guy, like it's just the pressure to be like the divine feminine and the divine masculine during that, like especially the 14 to 21 age gap right now, it is high. Like they are like
Mhm.
really feeling pressure to be, and that is why so many will just shut down, or completely rebel
They
against
don't
like,
have the tools to be able to
yes,
navigate why I'm feeling this way and why everything's being thrown at me either.
yeah. And of course this is like my perspective through my experiences, but I'm seeing what's happening like firsthand, like through, and that, if anything, that is one of the things that I'm trying to prevent for like my like kids, where it's like I see where like certain roads lead, and it's like I'm trying to like cut off like any of those and then like send them out when they're ready, and then also always have a safe spot for them. Like if he decides to go to school next year, we already said, I talked to my husband, I was like, I'm not going to say like you have to do the whole year, but I'm going to say like until Christmas break, like because
Yep.
I honestly think now uh it would be interesting to, now that we've gotten into such the flow of homeschool, it'd be interesting to like have him go back to such a structured
To
life.
know, to know
And
what.
that's, yeah, and that's another thing when I was talking about how like people like never thought I would be a homeschool parent, is one of the things, because like I am not a structured person. I'm not a routine person. I'm not like, so the
But
idea,
that is homeschool. Like that is,
well,
people don't
but
realize
the
that is.
assumption, yeah, but the assumption is that like with school comes like these structures and these routines and stuff, and it's like no, it's like actually the fact that like yesterday I was like, I'm done doing this program, let's go to the art museum. Like I
Yes.
literally just want like you guys to go do something, but I don't want to be like the, it's like, and then it's having that flexibility that it's like the day before I didn't plan out like some, but some homeschooling parents are like and that's amazing, that works for them. Like they will have their whole weeks mapped out. It's like the people like, have you ever been like a, I've never been a meal prepper. I always think
I
like sometimes
used to.
like when
I
I see,
haven't. I've been like my husband always says you should go back to that. So then we like actually have like set, and then we don't have to go the night of going. Huh? What are we gonna have for dinner? I have no clue. I'm starving, and my brain's not even processing.
yeah. Well, it's hilarious because 2 days ago or whatever day, anyways, one of the days was that's another thing too. I'm getting so thrown off of the days of the week. But like one of the days we made a huge day out of like cooking, like
Yeah.
like with measuring out stuff and like how long we cook like turkeys for and like stuff, and then like what all we can use the turkey, like, and so then I had one of my kids like look up like all the different recipes and like what we can turn the different turkey, like where I'm like, these are like
Yeah.
legit life skills that involve like the, because right now we're in fractional math,
Yeah.
so it's like heathen, and I was like doubling recipes, and like those right there, that's like they're learning stuff.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's
you're
not
reading.
always,
You're using your reading skills, and there's so many different things that
yeah,
are tied into those day to day tasks,
yeah.
and it's
And
fun.
then, yeah, right? Well, I mean, sometimes you're like, oh my God, get me out of here. I'm gonna leave the kitchen whenever we're baking cookies. I'm like, I need to, because they're just all four of them are fighting over who gets to crack the eggs. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But
But
it
that's
is,
also navigating that cycle of like turn taking and things. What I really love that we do is, so we have our core like in Wisconsin, and that's where I'm from. You have 6 core subjects that you have to cover in certain many hours or whatever. Which we go way over that. I'm not even worried about that. But there's those core, and then I include my own different topics too. But I give them like themes. So like I ask them like, what are you interested in? Like, what do you want to learn about this week? And one day it was dinosaurs. And okay, so I'm gonna find like science projects and like different things like, well, let's talk about what a paleontologist is and what they did. And then we look at the map, and like we pull in our activities to something that's interest to them. So then they want to learn, they're excited versus we're gonna learn about XYZ because I say so. Like it gives them that freedom, and almost like teaches them the skills of how to structure their own life. And like we have free time, so you have an hour of free time. Mom's got to do business stuff, like, oh, I have a meeting from here to here, so you get those times to decide, that you have this window, so you use your time wisely, however you want to do, however that looks for you, but you have here and here, and then we get to transition. So there's some days where like, oh, I wanted to do this but I ran out of time. Well, and how to look at the clock, so we're reading the clock and things like that, and kind of checking of what feels good and how to regulate your time. And
well, it's funny that you mentioned the whole dinosaurs and stuff, because so whenever we bring in a topic like dinosaurs, or like we're going over the Boston Tea Party, and I'm like, okay, so here is what mainstream media
yep,
says, and then I'm like, here are a few other theories. Now let's use our logic and think what, like, so then it turns into like a little bit of a debate thing where it's
yes.
like, have you heard they took debate out of a lot of the high schools?
No, I didn't, but that's what I do all the time. Like, here's my, and that I even do that for me. Like, here's my view and my opinion. I don't want you to take just because mom says so. Like,
Yeah,
this is what it is. Like, here's
or
my view.
because the book
Here's
said
another
so.
take. Here's another take. Now,
Yeah,
I'm making you an empowered decision maker. What do
Yeah.
you feel? What comes up to you as you hear this? And then they say like, well, that seems really harsh, whatever, about one
Yeah.
thing. And I say, okay, why? And it gets their little brains actually critically thinking and what it brings up for them. And I'm sad that they don't have debate and things like that, because you need to know how to have a healthy argument versus I'm always right, you're always wrong, or whatever. Like, you need to be able to explain why
There's
too, not just I'm canceling you because you don't agree with me.
well,
And
and then
that's
it's
the
like,
culture
well,
right now.
it goes in the conversation of like we need to interact with each other not through not through a space of trauma, not through a space of like
Yeah.
I know everything, just through like a conversation. That's why we can't even have conversations right now, because everyone's so freaking triggered by any
Yeah.
little, like, there's like when we were talking about the dinosaur thing, it was hilarious because my husband came home and I was like, oh, and he like will just kind of laugh because anyone who's listening should know that I was a conspiracy theorist before I went into the spiritual world. And so, and he just like, and my husband will just like laugh out, like, oh, I can't wait to hear what their version of dinosaurs are and stuff. I'm like, well, we talked about like, you know, but anyways, it's the thing that I'm like, they're just having these conversations. I'm like, I couldn't have this conversation with a lot of other like 37-plus-year-olds because they're so triggered by the idea that it's not what history has told
Yeah.
them. So it's like, it's just even being like telling them like, it's no one knows. Like it's all like
Yeah.
history. It's
Well,
like
and
I
that's what
say,
I always teach
history
my
was written
kids.
by the
History
victors.
is his story. That's why it says his story. It's somebody's story, somebody's view, somebody's lens that they're looking through. And then I always try to do role play. Like we do like the fables, so like Little Red Riding Hood and things like that. And I love the books that flip it. So we just did like the Three Little Pigs. So you
Mm,
read like the traditional classic Three Little Pigs, and then you see it from the wolf's point of view. And
mm,
then like so I love doing that where you can kind of flip, because I'm like, okay, so we automatically assume the wolf's a bad guy. Well, what
mm.
if the context changed a little bit and we are missing some pieces? Like, do you still feel like that wolf was in the bad guy, or was he kind of cranky and made a little bit of different decisions? And it gives them like understanding and compassion for
Mm,
situations where I don't know your story. I only know my story. And
mm,
maybe I need to take a few moments to kind of see where you're coming from before I judge you.
mm.
And I
That's
love
even
that.
in the, and it trickles into like them where when they're starting to tell me like, when there's blowout fight and like one of them's bleeding, they're all trying to tell me like their versions of the story. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be like a court case now. Like, why? Is like, and so it's like you hear all their different like stories. I'm like, I mean, and then like it's funny because one of the kids, I'm like, you clearly weren't even here. Now like you're just going off of what you heard from the other room.
Hearsay.
Yeah, exactly. Like now, like I don't like. Let's leave your version out. You're just in here, and then they also like. It's funny having four. They definitely like they'll team up with each other. So we call them the evens and the odds, because the evens and the odds, like 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, like they'll break apart and
Yep.
then they kind of like gang up against each other. And we're like,
I feel
oh,
like even when you have littler kids, like so that happens sometimes, is like one will get in trouble, and then my little guy will like defend him because he's like, no,
yeah,
no, my brother even though
yeah,
you clearly
oh,
can watch, like, but they've learned, like, I always say, like, kind of have a love-hate relationship because they can pick on
yeah.
each other so much. But then like if dad comes and starts tickle torturing this one will fly over the couch and
Yeah.
on top of dad.
And they have a weird, not a weird, it's a fascinating protection of their oldest brother. Like, because he is the one, like, so the three together, they're all really
Mhm.
close in age because
Yeah.
it's one and then twins, and then the oldest one's 2.5 years. Anyways, point of it is, so he's a little bit older, and he, like, like in their eyes, he can read and he can do
Yep.
these things. Like, he's so good
They're
at sports. So,
superhero.
like, they look at him. And so the three of them, like, together, it's like if I get even a little bit upset with the oldest one, they all are like, no, it wasn't him. It wasn't Cal. Like, yes, it was. Like, what is going on here? So that's so the stuff that like I hope that I'm like, that's the if I had like that, if my siblings and I like were, like that with each other to this day, like protecting each other, it's like it's what we're doing now. Like we're creating these circles and we're looking
Mhm.
for like our soul pods and our soul families. And when it's like I think there's a lot of our kids who came in with their soul families because, but I'm also, my kids are young, so who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe by 20 they're all like, oh my God, mom made us hang out way too much together. But
Well,
yeah.
and if you think about it, your siblings are your first best friends. They're the people that
Mhm,
you're living life with.
mhm,
And that you go home with every night. Like they're
mhm.
there. So it's good to strengthen that bond when you can
Yeah.
and have that. Like for me, that's what my sister used to always say and still says to this day. Like I know somebody always has my back. Like I can always turn to my big sister and she will always be there. No matter what is going on, she'll make the time to listen to me. And even if I'm saying the most ridiculous thing and she's like, wow, you're completely overacting, she will let me say my piece and be there for me. And that's our thing. Like I always say, do you want my advice or am I just listening? Like, cause
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
role that I realized as who I am. Like I have so much wisdom to share, but
Mm,
not every time does somebody actually open to receiving that. Sometimes
mm,
they just need me to hold the space just so they can be heard. And so
mhm.
I'm like, I don't want to give unsolicited advice. I'm breaking that generational pattern where I can just sit here and hold space for you and I don't have to say a word.
Yeah,
I can just help relate and help you express and feel your feelings and be in that moment and that's perfectly fine because I'm not here to fix anything. That's
yeah.
not my job.
Well, and that's like that right there, even what you're saying, those are like traits that we're passing down to our kids where it's like it's yeah, it's teaching them when to know just to be able to listen. Like I
Mhm.
swear, society, like some people like they don't even know how to listen anymore. We don't even know
Yeah.
how to listen to each other. And someone could like disagree with me, but I swear to God, most people are waiting for their turn to talk.
Yeah.
Like and not actually hearing what the other person is saying.
Yeah, like you this is my view and you have to agree. Like trying to prove something or justify themselves or convince somebody that their way is right versus just stopping and listening and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and going, huh, well, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Mhm.
You don't have to
Exactly.
agree. You can agree
Yeah.
to disagree, but you can still be a civil, loving human being to each other and have different opinions on life and still
Mhm.
coexist. Like there's
Exactly.
nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. And if like and even if that's just what we teach our this next generation of kids, like just how to like all these things we've been talking about, I'm like that is way more
Yeah.
important than learning how to sit in a be at a job from 8 until 5.
Yeah. And just follow rules that somebody above you sets and chase the
Yes.
dollar. Like, no, I want you to live. Like the whole point of life is to live and experience. And yes, there's things that we have to do. Like you have to have money to pay bills and have experience.
Yeah.
But you can there's more than just black and white. Like that's what I want
Yeah.
to teach my kids. Like there's a spectrum. There's a whole
Hmm.
spectrum. It's not just black or white. What are all the possibilities?
Yeah.
And what feels the best to me and quieting the noise of the world and be able to be an embodied person and be able to turn back in and say, okay, even though this person I love in the world, like everything in the world to me is saying this, but it something's just like not hitting right. I can turn in and see why and I can lean into that. And
Hmm.
maybe my kids are my biggest teachers, so maybe something I'm saying is an old pattern that I don't even realize until they say, hey mom, you said this, but do you realize you did that? And then I'm
Hmm.
like, oh crap. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's one other thing that I didn't realize that's something that's autopilot that I carry on that I
Hmm.
get to lean into and I can grow. And I
Hmm.
love how they teach each other too. Like your kids are watching you way more than you realize. Like
Hmm.
me doing my practices and things like that, they're watching. And I know because they start teaching each other. And when things are coming, like big emotions are coming up, somebody's hurt, like my middle one will go over to my youngest when he's being big emotions and a little bit dramatic sometimes. He'll go, remember, we're gonna breathe in and we're gonna blow out. We're gonna sniff the flowers and blow the dandelion. Like he'll do that because those are words that I've given them of different coping names. Sometimes he's like, let's just go jump on the trampoline, let's shake it all out. Like,
Yeah.
but they know like sometimes our body this works, sometimes this works. Like that's our nervous system. Sometimes we need to rev it up, but sometimes we need to ground it back down. and
Mhm.
navigating those pieces. But no one taught us that in school. At least for
No.
me, I can speak for me. Like I had to navigate that and figure it out on my own.
So one of the big practices I've started is when we go to bed at night, I no longer like read them books because I'm realizing the books kind of get them like really caught up in the story, and we have to like talk about the stories because into like chapter books. So we usually do that like like earlier in the days on the days
Mhm.
we do it. But so what we do at the end of the night is we clear our minds and our bodies, and we like do a lot of breath work, and then we work on our like telepathic skills.
Oh, I love it.
Telepathy. And so it's hilarious. This is like my biggest mom brag moment like ever. So we're getting pretty good. Like especially my oldest son and I, like we like can pass colors back and forth. Like it's like kind of insane. So we were at this birthday party the like a couple weeks ago, and we were playing charades. And uh it was all the adults were playing, but my oldest son was like, oh, can I play with you? He's the classic oldest, like he
Yes.
just wants to be with the adults, and he's a little bit older than a lot of like his peers. Like our friends have like start kind of at the
Littler.
where our 6-year-old is. So he's like, oh, can I play with you guys? And we're like, yeah. So anyways, I'm the one doing like the motions for the charades, and he gets like all of them. He's like rainbow, like trumpet, like all these different things. And so then they're like, oh god, like that was really quick. And I was the one who was really good on our team. So then we go through all the people, and he continues to like just get their like words when like they're just like they start to do the hand motion, they'll say it. And like the other couples there were like, okay, do you guys practice charades? Like, why is he so good at this? And I was like, no, but we practice like our telepathy.
Yes.
I was like, this is what it has to be. I was like, there's no other
Yeah, it's
explanation.
connecting to the energy of the situation and
Yeah.
reading it before it is. Well,
The
because if you
and
think about
like,
it, everything we think goes into our energy field. And
yeah,
the kids they're super open channels. So he's just
yeah.
tapping in and he's getting that thought before it even
Oh, to
populates. I
like
love it.
say the least, there were 4 teams doing it. So because we were doing 2 teams against 2 teams, and we killed it. Like we were literally the best. And like it was when we were leaving, they're like, okay, like make sure like we bring Cal back for. And I was like, I know. Anyway, so it was one of those moments where I know he was tapping into something. And it was just one of those, and like I could care less if he like got an A on his like his
Yeah.
spelling test, and like that was so cool.
And he's
And
going
like
to take that
that,
skill into
yeah.
his life. That's going to make a bigger difference than an A on my math test.
Yeah, being able to connect into people's energies
Yeah.
and thoughts and stuff. Well, and it was so funny this morning. My husband was getting them ready to go, like he took them out today, and he's like he said something to my husband, and I go, hey Cal, I was like, come here, like, and I said to the 2 oldest boys, I was like, dad, I was like, you guys should read his energy right now and like really figure out how to like interact with him through like what like. And so then sure enough, my oldest comes back in and is like, oh yeah, he's like, he's a little grumpy, he's like, I'm gonna like like he
And then
knew.
you can play
Yeah,
the room, and you can when you can read the room, you can
yeah,
adjust, not changing who you are, but you can adjust your
yeah,
energy, because sometimes when your energy is here and you have a loud energy, this person gets the
yeah.
energy interacts. So you can, okay, I'm going to bring this down, kind of match, and I can bring them up. Not that you're lowering your energy, it's just the quality of it, like
Well,
the
so what he did is how he interpreted this. My oldest was like, he got all of the 3 his little brothers ready to help his dad because he could tell his
love
dad
it.
was like in
Yeah,
that
making it
mode.
easier.
Yeah, so he's like, I'm gonna do something to help it, like, because he's getting frustrated easily and stuff like that, because it's like getting the kids out of the house, and like I don't know if you're, but like it's just a little
Oh
bit
yeah,
harder
that's
for dads.
oh yeah. You have people going everywhere and their own little personalities and
Yeah. So like I was like, oh my god, I was so impressed by like, and then my second one, because the twins are 4, they just turned 4, so they're the ones where they get really like so it's like the 2 older ones knew to just put on their like to just they were very aware
they didn't
of
have
their
to ask, they just
emotions
did what
because
they needed to do.
like
Yeah.
it was like we need to make sure. And I was like, that like those are skills right there where I honestly think we should be teaching our
Oh yeah.
kids to like read a room, like honestly, like especially like oh god, yeah,
And
it's
as
so funny.
I hear you saying that, like partially is there a little bit of like co-regulating the nervous system. Because
Yeah.
if they can regulate their nerve, like I feel dad's dysregulated. If I
Yeah.
can regulate my nervous system, I'm not playing into his nervous system. So
Yeah.
we all kind of come back to that homeostasis.
Well, like even when he was in, because my husband was in, he's doing this thing right now, so he has to work really late, and like he's going into work later and stuff. And so he's sleeps so thrown off. So this morning, even like before he left, he tried to ask me a question, and I was like, honestly, I was like, I can't, like with this energy right now. I was like, oh, we'll talk about this when you get home, like when you self-regulate it. And I was like, and I think you should be aware when you go into that car with all of your children that they are can pick up like
Oh
what.
yeah.
It was just funny. It's like that whole thing of we're all just aware of each other's like energies, but a lot of times people are aware of each other's energies and they poke it,
Yep.
or it's like we just kind of gave each other space to like feel whatever you
Yep.
need to feel and like to come back. And it's like that's what
Be able to hold this space and just say, okay, like I can feel that there's like lots of stuff shifting right now, that I'm gonna
mhm.
kind of step back. Like I said, I'm gonna not antagonize, and I'm gonna let them process and integrate where they're at, and then come in, because I'm gonna be better received. Like these are skills that they're
Mhm.
learning that they can apply in every relationship they
Ex-
have,
every
professionally and like personally.
Well, and that's what like I said something a little earlier and I wanted to like verify like there is nothing like there are so many great jobs where you're an employee. I'm not one of those people who where I think everyone should be an entrepreneur. Like I think that
Oh yeah.
there are so many people who have like and the whole thing is that like when people like teaching them how to when they like go into like situations like choose people who don't put you in like a 9 to 5 box, like let them like choose people like choose to work for companies and people who let you express
Yeah.
yourself, who let you like if like you can get a whole month of work done in like a day, like then let like people like choose people who will honor like your different work skills,
Yeah.
and realize that if you have a boss that wants you to spread that out, that you should keep that to yourself.
Well, yeah, and some people thrive in that time frame piece because they can
Yes,
just work at work, but it's just figuring out what feels right to you. And it
exactly.
doesn't feel like super constrictive, that you still can express and learn and grow and be able to have that piece, because not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is
No,
not easy like people like
no.
kind of paint it sometimes. Like you're not
Yeah,
going to just wake up overnight and then come up with this like $1 million program and be sipping on mai tais on the ocean. Like that's not that's not reality.
right? I'm like, I actually think like the more and more I go into like working for myself, I'm like, man, I think it would be great just to find a great employer who like, wants
Yeah.
who like I think it would be cool if we went into like a little bit more of like contracting like things out, where it's like
Yeah.
you have like where it's like sometimes I don't want to do it all. You can do the work, but you don't want to have to do everything for yourself, like set up like the meetings and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So it's like
Well, and it
if
plays
you
off of
can,
people's strengths too. Like that's how I think it
yeah,
was back in the day, like a community. How community works is like being able to see every people's strong suits of like this really lights up this person. Like this person's really artistic and they're whatever
yeah,
they can do this. This person is really like
yes,
detail orientated. So this role would be perfect, and like introducing that and helping the community function as a whole organism, because that's what it is. Like we're all part of one, like we're all
yeah,
parts of the whole, and to figure out where we mesh and stop trying to pretend that we're this racket
hmm,
thing over here, when really like this is where we're meant to be, this part of
yeah.
the organism.
Well, I'm noticing with the homeschool program, so we started doing the thing where we're just after the break, we're gonna bring in someone to teach like English to our oldest
Yep.
one, just like a lot of that, just come in like an hour a week. And that's another thing, like just because I don't know how to teach you. Like, I know like what, pronouns, preposition, adverbs are and stuff like that, but there's definitely a skill that
Yeah,
like other people
somebody
have that
else's strength that's not my
yeah,
strength, so I can lean in, and that's an important skill to teach our kids too.
yeah,
Like
all
we
that
all have our
helpful.
strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah,
and our weaknesses aren't bad, and we get to strengthen those parts, but we also can know when to ask for help. And when
exactly.
can we rely on
Exactly.
somebody else? Like for me, like history is my husband's like forte. Like he loves history. He's a history buff. Where for me, I give me like the math, science, reading, like that type of stuff. That is mine. So it plays well that I'm like, okay, so dad's taking over this part, or Or like if we wanted to source, like, this is something that you're really interested in and it's out of my zone of expertise, let's go find somebody outside to teach you about that.
Well, it's also working from, like, I noticed something with home, like with making this shift, like you kind of work through traumas or like triggers that you don't
Yep.
even realize you had, like where it's like I was running from a space of like, I can do it all. I
Mhm.
can have the cleanest house. I can like make all the food. I can do like I
Wonder
can
Woman.
teach all these kids. What?
Wonder
Yeah.
Woman.
Yeah, like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, that's like part of our programming to like we burn
Mhm.
ourselves out, where it's like now it's like I realized with this homeschooling, like one of the great things about it is I got to open my eyes to like, oh, I can outsource some of these things. I don't need like
Mhm.
no one's watching me. Like I don't like because
Yeah,
you just
you have nothing to
feeling.
prove to anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's something that I realized, like I thought all these people were watching me and like saying these things and like, oh gosh, it's so, but it's like no, like no one's watching you. Like just literally like get the help. Like you don't have to do it all
Yeah.
yourself. Like that's not the point of this. The point of this is
There's
actually
no
for all
reward at
this
the end of the day of how many
for
things
all
that
this
did you juggle
yeah,
on your
and
own
to
and
be
you
able to
weren't.
like connect, yeah, and to be able to like connect with each other and stuff, and that's part of it is to make like these networks and connect and stuff, and it's like we think we isolate ourselves so much and act like we can do it all, but it's like when you make those connections and stuff like that, and then it's like you bring beautiful people into their lives that
Mhm.
are teaching them skills that you don't have, so
Absolutely.
it's just, and like personalities, because then you get to vet out your own people when you send them to school, which is totally fine. Like, and as they're older, that's great. But like at their age, we're like forcing them to be with all these personalities that we haven't vetted. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like to be able to kind of like bring people into our household and put it through like my own filtration system feels really good too.
Well, that, and if you think about it, a child, when they first enter the school, it's not only scary because it's a completely different environment. There's by themselves.
Mm.
Like it's very traumatic if you really think about it from that point of view, is like your main support, you're like your loving parent drops you off into this strange place with strange people with big emotions and then just leaves you and you have to hope that they come back and pick you up later. They say they're going to, but who knows? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a whole new world.
So in a lot of my readings, I noticed that like, so in like my multi-dimensional readings, I noticed that sparks of people really, really get dimmed during like they have like that when you got to that school age. I've seen this like a few times where it's like that's when like a spark of them, an aspect of their self kind of started to hide because they didn't feel they left their home where they got to be
Mhm.
everything and like get to like do all their crazy stuff, and then they get into these school systems also, and that's when they learn how to like hide parts of themselves that like
Mhm.
they don't think other people want,
Yep.
like even if it's my boys, the wild and crazy parts
Yep.
that are like actually like they that is a part of themselves because they wanted it to be a part of their experience. But then you have these people telling them nonstop to like stop talking, sit down, da, da, da. And so that parts of them starts to dim out because you don't honor it, you don't tell them to go
You don't give
outside.
them space to be able to tap into
Yeah,
that piece too. Like there's a
yeah.
time and place where you can listen, and listening and following rules are important skills too. But there's also having the space of being human and knowing like energy builds up. We as an adult are not meant to sit for 8 hours a day and have somebody teach us, or you know what I mean? Like your brain can only absorb so much energy at the same, or so much information at the same time. So like having those brain bakes, being able to encourage to move your body is super important. And be able to
Well, it's
step away and be
also,
like, "Whoa, this is just enough." Like, "Mom, I want to go outside because
yeah,
we may have only spent like 10 minutes on this topic, but this is a new topic and my brain's full right now." Like
yeah.
my kiddos will say that, like, "Mom, my brain's full. I need a brain break." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "All right." And I honor that.
And there's also a reason why there's such huge market for people who do inner child work.
Mhm. Yep.
Like people are
Absolutely.
working through the shit that they experience as children that like is still like a part of them is still living inside. That part of them is still inside of them.
Yep.
But yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I just love these conversations, and I know we could talk about it forever, but
Mm.
we can kind of close up for here, and I'll definitely have you back on the podcast and talking about different aspects, but I am so thankful for having you here with us and
Thank you so
opening
much
this
for
this conversation and giving people an kind of a look in, because I don't know about you, but I get that question all the time, like, so you homeschool, what does that actually mean? Like,
yeah.
why do you do what you do? Like, you're insane. You want to be with your kids 24/7. Like, why? I get that a lot. And like, how does that look? Like,
Yep.
I can't even wrap my brain around it because I haven't opened that to be even a possibility. And giving those like little starter pieces to people to kind of see that
Yep.
we're raising this new embodied, empowered future. And
Mhm.
our future is important. So letting them have a better, not just do what we do, but allowing them to be who they want to be
Mhm.
and choose to be and be that embodied person to be able to turn back in and give them the tools that we wish we would have had back then we wouldn't have to do as much unpacking and trauma work now.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, is there anything you would want to leave anyone listening here on this topic
No,
before we call it a close?
I think it's just that if you're even on the fence about it, or even if like you're not even there yet, just to entertain the idea. And like you said, it's fascinating how many people who I wouldn't even expect, who like I wouldn't say are in like the kind of more like aware community still are thinking about like the homeschool thing because they're seeing what the ladder is like they're here having experiences at their like schools that like just don't feel right, so it's like
Yeah,
it's spreading out through like the right now it's like it's taking over in a lot of different communities, a lot of different people, and I think it's pretty cool. And it's definitely one of those things where all moms are like, I just couldn't even imagine. But it's the hardest part is unschooling yourself. I swear to
yeah,
God, the hardest part is
absolutely.
to unprogram yourself from thinking that you are going to turn your house into not a, like a 8 to 3 school classroom.
Yes, and that's not physically like sustainable to
No, it's
anyone.
not.
Yeah,
Nope.
it's not serving the kids, it's not serving you, it's not serving anything. It's a lot of
Exactly.
pressure. But yeah, I mean, it just comes back to just trusting yourself, and if you have that nudge of just kind of like looking in and seeing what the possibilities are, and maybe that's not a possibility, but you can still take some of these concepts and integrate them when they're not in school too, is just making that safe
Oh
home
yeah.
open space too. So I mean,
Oh
this is
yeah.
not just for homeschooling, it's just looking our view of like parenting and how we do it a little differently, and I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am
Cool. Well,
so
thank
excited and
you.
so honored to have you here today, and I know that this is the message that somebody needed to hear, and I just love that. But,
Thank you so much
all
for
right.
having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soul Revolution Tribe and being part of our soul family. If anything in this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share your takeaways. You can find me on IG at Grow with Jackie B or on YouTube at Soul Revolution Tribe. I will see you next week for more soul conversations and medicine. Bye for now, and see you back soon.